Hello and welcome to another episode of The Holistic Way. I am Todd Hart and I'm the host of the show. And today we have a very special guest with us, Jessie Diggins. And it's a funny story how we met. I was doing a class on essential oils at Rafa Yoga in Cranston. And I met a young lady there who was doing the raw foods. I thought was you. And so the next day, we friended each other on Facebook, and then we've been talking back and forth.
Long conversations.
And we both did a radio show. You did it first. Was it Josette? Josette
Pugh, yeah.
Right?
Get
and
Josette.
So you did it. I reached out to you asking you how to get on the show, and then I did the show. And then I realized that you weren't the person I thought who originally met. So we just actually recently met. Officially met in person this past Friday.
Yes.
But we've been talking for...
I feel like I know you.
Yeah, it's a lifetime. So why don't you take a minute, introduce yourself, and tell everybody what you do.
Okay.
And then we'll chat about it, and I think this will be fun.
Great. First, thank you for having me. It's just such an exciting experience to be here and be a part of this. And like you said, my name is Jessie Diggins. I teach yoga primarily, but my passion is wellness. I call myself a wellness enthusiast. And part of that includes nutrition, part of it includes mindful eating, and there's a large portion of that which is yoga. The style of yoga that I'm trained in is called forest yoga, and it's a very specific style of yoga designed to help injury and emotional roadblocks and to help people overcome things that kind of build up in our lives that may challenge us in physical and emotional ways. And then the practice, which is a very physical practice, is designed to get people back in touch with spirit. So it's healing, it's exceptional for the body, but also the mind and the heart. I absolutely love teaching it. It's one of my favorite things to do. So that's
Awesome.
what I primarily do. The secondary piece of that is the nutrition practice. And when I say nutrition practice, I talk about mindful eating more than anything. Mostly because I think it's worth having a discussion about why we eat in the first place before we talk about what we eat and how we eat. So I spend a lot of time talking about, well, why are you eating in the first place? That's a really important discussion to me.
Right.
And I did this through my education background, which I have an undergraduate degree in nutrition from Colorado State University and a graduate degree in nutrition from University of Rhode Island. And it was in that graduate degree that I started exploring mindful eating. I did my whole thesis on that. So I love it, and it's worked for me, so share it with others.
So what is mindful eating, for those that don't know what that is?
Mindful eating is eating with intention and attention. So there's two pieces of that. It's eating, knowing why you're eating in the first place, eating with purpose, and then while you're actually eating, paying attention to what you're doing, how the food tastes, how it feels as you're eating it, what it smells like, the texture, what it looks like, how the food physically gets from your mouth to your stomach. And that's boiled down into a very condensed version. There's so much that goes into mindful eating.
So we're all born with an innate ability. I think the first thing we want to do is eat when we come out of the womb. So do we lose our connection to when we're hungry? Is that what this is about?
That's right. Unfortunately, yes. So think of a child. What are characteristics of a child and how they eat? What are your thoughts?
Children eat when they're hungry. That's for sure, because my daughter would just pick at food all day. And then when right before bed, I'm starving. Yeah. And she'd want white rice. Okay. She always wanted a bowl of rice.
She knew exactly what she wanted, though.
Right. And she now is on the track and field. She's on the volleyball team. Yeah. I've never worried about her eating habits.
Sure.
I let her, because I felt like she knew what she needed. And I try to tell other parents that, like, your kids really know. And I've noticed that when people interfere with their children, those are the kids that tend to have eating disorders, either weight gain or maybe an eating disorder. So is that sort of, do we screw up our patterns somewhere along the way?
We absolutely do, and we have to remember, and now I'm not a parent, so I can't speak specifically to that, but in seeing other people and how they interact with their children, we have to remember that we're raising adults, that we're not just raising children, that we're raising adults. And yes, to your question, we do lose track of our instinctive eating habits as we grow up. has partly to do with what's expected of us in society and partly to do with the things that we're taught by our parents. So when we go to school, we're having to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then lunch is at a very specific time.
Right.
Then there's usually a time between when kids get home from school and when they actually have dinner. So there's some playtime, there's some homework time, there's probably a snack time in that. And then there's actual dinner time where maybe they sit down with their family, maybe they have a home-cooked meal, maybe they're grazing. So in that time, we become very scheduled in our eating because moms generally want their kids to eat before they go to school.
Right.
So you have to eat whether you're hungry or not because my mom at least wanted to know that I was fed before I went to school.
So the intention was good.
Exactly.
But the outcome may have been bad.
It always is.
Okay.
The intention is always good because food is nourishing. And I would imagine as parents wanting to take care of kids, you want to know that they're being nourished and fed and cared for.
So we're developing these patterns where we're eating at this scheduled time, but we may not be hungry.
Exactly.
So we're filling our bodies with food, we're taking in extra calories that we may not need.
Exactly.
And so that's where some of the issues is coming from.
And eating for reasons other than physical hunger. So we get disconnected from what physical hunger feels like, what is and what isn't hunger. So there's a whole slew of reasons that you might be eating other than physical hunger. They fall into 3 different categories: physical, environmental, and emotional. So when a child comes in, falls down, bangs their knee, is crying because something hurts, and one of the parents says, "Here, have a popsicle.
Yes.
You're fine, you're fine,
Yes.
you're fine."
Yes.
And they have the popsicle, then immediately that association becomes, when I'm hurt or scared or tired, if I have something sweet, then that will make me feel better. So done over and over and over and over again, that becomes a very distinct pattern in our brains.
Right. And it becomes a go-to. So when they're hurt,
Exactly.
they'll turn to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So as adults, first step in redirecting that course is recognizing it and then reconnecting with your instinct wisdom to be able to recognize what hunger is and what hunger isn't, and then what to do when you're not hungry but you still want to eat.
So the old adage, you better clean your plate before you leave the table, that's probably actually setting them up for issues down the line.
Right. What are they learning by you have to clean your plate unless you want to leave the table?
So you're learning to ignore your own inner voice telling you you're full, your own body telling you. You're not listening to your body.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole slew of other adages that parents tell us. Well, if you don't finish the food on your plate, people will go hungry in another part of the world.
And it's your fault.
And it's your fault. So then there's a whole bunch of guilt on top of it.
Oh my goodness.
So now we have all of these emotions woven into our eating habits. So it's no wonder that they get so tricky and hard to navigate.
Wow.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is very fascinating because usually you think, you just consume less calories, work out more, you'll be fine.
Exactly.
But there's so much more going on here.
Exactly.
So how did you get involved? What attracted you to this? What was it that made you have an interest in this?
My own confusion with how to eat and what to eat and why I'm eating. And that stemmed from a lifelong struggle with food and being overweight for a significant time in my life. And then recognizing that I was overweight and didn't look like other people. And having some social pressure to look a certain way. So I started exercising like crazy. I started dieting like crazy. This is a really sad fact. The average age that kids, specifically little girls, start dieting in this country is age 8, which is gut-wrenching to me. And I was about 11 the first time that I started changing my food habits. And I will preface this by saying that my parents knew exactly what I was doing and they were very attentive and careful and watching me.
That was going to be a question of, did you do this behind your parents' back, or they were aware that you weren't comfortable, you wanted to make some changes?
So at first, everything was out in the open. Then it became a little bit behind their back. And I became a little too obsessed with things and got into eating disorder territory.
Okay.
That's what prompted me to go to school for nutrition, because I had no idea. I had no idea what was healthy, what wasn't healthy, what made me feel good. So I was looking for outside information, someone else to tell me, okay, eat this, and it'll make everything okay.
So what happened with, at first your parents were open, communicating with you. What happened where you felt like you had to kind of hide it Was it something they were doing?
It was
or
me.
It was you.
It was me. It was me feeling like I had to be in control all the time, and I had to achieve a very specific, internal, rigid standard of something. And I know what that was, and maybe it's a longer conversation elsewhere,
Right. Okay.
I know what that was. And for the longest time, I was binge exercising. I was greatly restricting what I was eating. I was excluding entire food groups. I was a vegetarian for years, which I know now is just not the best thing for my body. It's not for everybody.
So two things I want to talk about is, one, what can parents do differently so that they're not setting their kids up for failure? And then the second part of that would be, after you answer that, is what can adults do now that we're on our own and maybe we have a weight issue, maybe we're not comfortable with our eating habits. So let's start with the parents. Like, what would you recommend to a new parent or someone that has children that maybe are struggling with weight issues? What do you recommend what they do or
I'm
not
glad
do?
we're starting there, because the second part of that question is really important, is what can parents do with themselves as adults to reconnect with their instinctive signs
That's
of
a good point.
hunger
They need
and
to
fullness.
reconnect too, don't they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the second piece of that question is, what could they do with their kids? And my answer would be, model that behavior. Do what you would like to teach your kids. Or observe your kids without interfering, see what they're doing, and then perhaps follow their lead.
So maybe they sit down for dinner, but the parents don't make them eat the dinner, and they make food available later on. Because I know some families will say, you eat dinner and that's it. There's no more food after
Sure.
that. So if the kid's not hungry, maybe at 8:30 they do want to eat something. So maybe make that available to them. If you're not ready to eat now, would like to sit together for some family time. But if you're hungry later, you can certainly eat later.
Exactly. What's the true need in that scenario? The true need is parents want their kids to be at the table, family time, talking, connecting.
Right.
Is it that you want the child to eat? I'm not sure. It's individual. It's specific to different families.
Right.
But the true need might be just having the unit together at a certain time of day, every day.
Sure, just reconnecting the
Exactly,
family.
exactly. And then it just also happens to be convenient that everybody is eating.
Yeah.
And you can train your hunger a little bit to be hungry at certain times. Kids, I wouldn't recommend doing this. So remember that kids already know how to do this themselves.
Right, naturally. Yes.
Naturally.
Right.
But for a parent who wants to have dinner with their family and is maybe starving when they get home from work, but know that they still need to decompress, they still need to connect in with their family, make sure that their kids are doing what they need to do after school, and then make dinner, and then whatever other activities that happen. Families are very busy these days.
Right.
So they might come home ravenous, have a snack, and not be hungry for dinner. What you eat greatly affects whether you're going to be hungry soon or long after you eat it. So there are three types of macronutrients, three types of components in our food: fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. When you eat one of those by themselves, say a carbohydrate, it moves through your stomach fairly quickly, because your stomach doesn't have to call in a whole bunch of enzymes and a whole bunch of different chemicals to move the food through. So it goes through pretty quickly. When you eat a mixed macronutrient meal, so a mixture of fat, protein, and carbohydrate, that sits in your stomach for longer, because the body has to sift through it, call a whole bunch of players in to help move that through the digestive system, and it sticks a little while longer. It makes you feel fuller longer.
And is that recommended?
Well, it depends what you want your hunger rhythms to be. So if you come home from work and you want to be hungry for dinner, but you're starving at, say, 5:30, 6 o'clock, have something that will digest quickly. An apple or some crackers, whatever it may be.
Sure.
And that way, you can still be hungry for dinner and meet all of your needs of eating and spending time with family, if that's what the need is.
Right. Okay. So as an adult, we talked about children. As an adult, where do you start with something like this? Do you keep a journal and look at, every time you eat, how am I feeling? Do you explore your feelings? Where do you start with something like this?
That's part of it. And what I'd like to do now is shift to the first slide. I brought
perfect.
2 slides. And I want to tell you about this program that I teach called Am I Hungry? And it's the program that I personally did to reconnect with my instinctive hunger rhythms. And I mean, after years of dieting and binge exercising and going crazy and feeling out of control, this is what finally got me to say, oh, I'm hungry. Well, I can eat when I'm hungry.
And you teach this at Rafa,
I
correct?
do, yeah.
Okay.
I teach this. So I'm a licensed facilitator of this program, but this is not my brainchild. This was created by a physician in Arizona named Dr. Michelle May, who is a self-proclaimed recovered yo-yo dieter herself. So this is her brainchild. And what it is, it's based on what's called the mindful eating cycle, which reads like a clock, starting with the decision point of why. This answers the question, why do I eat? There are 6 decision points in the entire cycle, and each of these decisions happen every single time we eat, whether we know it or not.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is this a one-time thing, or is it every time you sit down to eat?
Every single time.
Why am I eating? And all of these questions you should be asking. You should be asking yourself this?
Well, should not so much, but in order to reconnect with hunger, it's exercise just to help you figure out what's going on every time you eat.
Okay.
This does become automatic after a while.
So it's helping you reconnect with
Just
your
revert
natural
back.
instincts.
Yep,
Okay.
you're just reverting back to natural instincts. But having been so disconnected from them for so long, some people are like, whoa, I have no idea. How the heck do I do this? So we start by asking, well, why are you eating? Are you hungry, or is there something else going on? Then the second question is, when do I want to eat? This is the when decision point. So is it because there's an external or emotional trigger? Is it because somebody else is telling you to eat? Those are the rules of rigid dieting.
Okay.
The next decision point is what? And that answers the question, well, what do I eat? This is where most diets start, with the list of eat this, not that.
Right.
There are 2 decision points before this one that occur every single time you eat, before the what do I eat part. So we're just coming into the cycle too low with diets.
Okay. So we're missing some first steps. Okay.
Key information. So when I teach this program, we spend the first 4 weeks on the first 2 decision points.
Wow.
They're the most important.
Wow.
It's tons of information about hunger and fullness and what to do when you're not hungry but you still want to eat.
Right.
So the next decision point is how. This is the actual mindful eating piece of things. How do I eat?
So don't sit in front of a television.
Yep.
Things like that. Don't have your computer or your phone. You should be focusing on eating.
Or at least mindfully multitasking, where you're looking at your food for 1 second, tasting it, and then turning back to whatever it is that you're doing.
And then maybe when you come back to your food, am I still hungry or am I done?
Exactly.
Do I, maybe half a plate is still there, but I'm done, I'm full.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I teach people how to give themselves visual cues on their plates to help feel fullness as it starts to develop over the course of a meal. It's very sneaky, it's very wily, and you have to listen very carefully. But it happens, and it's easier to hear once it knows you're listening again. Much easier to hear.
Now, do you suggest people, because I know some people will drink water before a meal to kind of fill themselves up. Do you recommend any of that, or is that sort of tricking your body? Because that seems like it's almost tricking your body if you do something like that.
In a sense, it's tricking your body.
Okay.
If you think about what hunger is your body's signal telling you that you need fuel because you need energy to live your life.
Right. So
if we were driving down the road and we passed a gas station, what we'd immediately do is look at our gas gauge.
Right.
And if it were 3/4 full, we'd probably keep driving.
Sure.
But if it were a quarter full, you pull in, you get gas.
Right.
If it were about a quarter full, you wouldn't pull in and put water in it.
Right.
You'd need
right.
fuel
You need
to
fuel.
keep going and
Good
keep
point.
going on your
Good
trek.
analogy. Yeah, very good analogy.
So,
Yeah.
Same thing. If you're walking by a plate of food, this is your internal gas gauge.
Right.
So if you're walking by a plate of food, the trick is to say, okay, am I actually hungry? Check in. 3/4 full. Nope, keep on going. Something else happened. What else triggered me? Or quarter full, yeah, probably need to slow down and get a little more fuel. So we have that internal gas gauge. It's just a matter of finding it and listening to it.
Rediscovering it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool.
The final 2 decision points is how much do I eat? That's the fullness piece of things.
Right.
And figuring out just about how much food is enough
Well, I think
to
of
fill you.
Thanksgiving. I immediately go to Thanksgiving at my brother-in-law's house, and you just, there's so much food, and then like before you know it, you're like, oh my God, I can't move.
I feel sick.
Yeah.
This is horrible.
Luckily, I only do that once a year.
Yeah.
So.
Make a fist with your right hand.
Okay.
And take a look at that. That's about the size of your stomach when it's empty.
Wow.
which is pretty small.
That's very small.
And it sits right underneath your breastbone, right at this hollow part of the rib cage and the top of the abdomen.
Okay.
And then open your hands, 2 palms up. This is about the amount of food that comfortably fills your stomach.
Wow.
Which is also really disappointing for people.
So a bowl, essentially, that big, that's what would fill your stomach.
And remember, it's chewed food. So it's a case for really chewing your food. Because if you want to eat more and you know that you can comfortably fit about this much, then
chew it.
Chew it. Yeah.
Wow. This is fascinating.
And the last decision point is where, which is where do I invest my energy? When I first saw this, I automatically thought, where on my body is the energy going? And that's diet thinking.
Right.
Where am I going to be storing this?
Like women thinking, oh, it goes to my hips, it goes to my stomach. That's what, okay.
Right. And this is, well, where do I invest my energy? Where are you going to put that fuel in living your life? Because that's why we eat. We eat to keep going.
Right.
So where are you going to invest that? So a large part of what we talk about in the last workshop, which is about 8 workshops total, is how do you optimally balance your body, your mind, your heart, and your spirit? So we have a large discussion about, okay, now that you've freed up all of this energy from dieting and worrying about overeating, what are you going to use it for?
Right.
Which is one of my favorite things to talk about.
So what do you do with it?
Anything you want.
So exercise?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Movement. So exercise has become a 4-letter word for a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. As is diet, which is a 4-letter word too.
Right.
Yeah.
And they use exercise as punishment or as a way to eat more food later or as bargaining tool. So your body is born to move and it responds to movement and it really likes it if you find something that you like doing.
Right.
You know, if things hurt your body, then it's probably not worth
I've got to
doing.
think that when someone first comes to this program, they're introduced to it, that it's almost like a counseling session where there's probably going to be a wall, there's going to be a breakthrough, and there's going to be an emotional outburst. Does that happen? Do you see that?
Generally. Most people come to this program at their wit's end. They have tried so many diets they can't count anymore. They feel like nothing works. They want to be cared for. They want to be coached along in the process. And that's what I'm here to do, is I'm here to just kind of guide and help facilitate that process of reconnecting with your instinctive ability to already know how to do this.
Right.
And sometimes we just need a little reassurance.
So if someone is overweight and you know, you're holding up your hand and you're showing this much food, they're a larger person. Wouldn't they need more food to fill them up, or is there still like, how do you work with that? Because I know that you're supposed to consume less calories, and if you want to lose a certain amount of weight, so how do you work that into the program?
So not necessarily. Our stomach is a smooth muscle, so it expands when we fill it with more food. There's a common misconception that it gets stretched out and it stays stretched out.
Oh, so it actually contracts?
It actually gets smaller.
Okay.
And those gurgling feelings, that gnawing feeling that is a part of what physical hunger feels like, is the movement of the smooth muscle of the stomach moving back toward one another into this smaller position.
Ah, so when you hear your stomach growling, they'll call it, right?
Yes,
Is that what you mean?
that's
So
exactly
it's
right.
actually...
It's the rippling movement of the stomach moving a little closer in and emptying out.
Fascinating.
So with people who overeat and people who may be overweight, the mechanism that's happening in your body is taking in more calories than you need fuel.
Right.
So your body has no choice but to store it. It's a very, very smart thing because there were times not so long ago that food wasn't available in our country. And even now there is some food insecurity, which is you know, quite sad.
It is sad, yeah, I agreed.
But people have no choice but to store that elsewhere. And people come to me and they say, well, I'm never hungry. And that could be true. So if you're eating for reasons other than physical hunger all the time, you could never be hungry. So for people who struggle with this, it's giving them the confidence to wait until they're hungry and trust that it will come back. It will come back, listening to it and feeling for it.
Could they not be hungry because they're eating but not realizing that they're eating?
Exactly.
Because it's more of an emotional or even an automatic.
Exactly.
Where when they get in the car, they grab something, they stop at Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's, and they're not really thinking about it.
Exactly. And there's lots of associations. Just going to the movie theater or a ballpark or summer's coming. There's Barbecues.
I immediately think of hot dogs when you say ballpark.
Right?
I think Fenway Franks. I immediately think of that. And I think of Doughboys.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's this
Carnivals.
Carnivals, popcorn, cotton candy. Yeah, you're right.
There's these really strong connections with these because at these places, movies, ballpark, carnivals, wherever it may be, something probably really great happened there. We went with someone that we liked or loved, and someone took care of us. And that's what we're wanting to experience over and over and over again.
Right.
It may not be the food at all. It might just be the memory.
Right. And we're trying to relive that,
Yeah.
but yet we're bringing the food into it. I know we have a couple of minutes left. Is there a second slide that you wanted to talk about that sort of wraps everything up?
Let's talk about the instinctive eating cycle, which is the second slide. And this is what we're aiming to get back to. So in an instinctive eating cycle, it's the same cycle. What we just saw was the mindful eating cycle. This is what we're aiming to get back to. So the driver in this case is fuel, eating when you're physically hungry. Then when you eat is when you're hungry. So what you eat in that case, people who eat instinctively eat whatever they want. And to be clear, that does not mean only vegetables or only lean meats. It's whatever they want.
Wow.
So on the flip side of things, we'll get there in a second, is the fullness. So eating whatever they want, they know just about how much they need to feel satisfied with that.
Okay.
Then how is intentionally sitting, eating, tasting, enjoying the food. How much is enough to satisfy hunger. So if hunger doesn't tell you to start eating, there isn't a signal that's going to tell you to stop. So hunger and fullness work together. Yep. And then where is where you're putting that energy back into your life. So this is what we're aiming to get people back to. I love talking about it, and
this is fascinating. I am amazed that we've run out of time
already.
And I could go on talking to you for another half hour.
I have to ask you what the smell is.
Oh, this is wild orange.
Oh, it's awesome.
Again, I'm the essential oils guy that we talked about in the previous show. We're diffusing wild orange, and it just puts you in. Does it put you in a happy mood?
Like really does.
Like you're a ebullient. Like, oh, life is great.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I love the essential oils. Thank you so much for being here today. I mean, you've taught us a lot. There's a lot of information. So if anyone has questions, they can send an email to the show, theholisticway@hotmail.com. Reach out. Jessie teaches at Rafa Yoga in Cranston. There's classes there. They've got a website that you can Google, Rafa Power Yoga in Cranston. Highly recommend that you attend her class because it's fantastic and the information is wonderful. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for tuning in this week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for another show. Stay healthy.